picking back up where we left off, we designed on the right-hand side of the screen in Figma what we want this, we'll call it this card view, what this categorical card view, how we want it to look. And so what this is representative of, each color would represent a hospital, and then the pricing within this category. So we'll display the average price at the top, and then you can hover over or click into each circle and get some data. And then if we don't have data for a given hospital, then we'll show this blanked out, and you will use dashes, and we'll just say no data available. So we've got everything comped up. We know what we want to build. We're following, we're inspired by this New York Times interactive graphic that they built. And the first thing I want to build, I want us to put two things in our project. One, I want to just build this bubble chart. We'll see how it looks. We'll figure it out as we go. Two, we're going to build this categorical views. These are two distinct views of the data. I think the easiest place to get started is just to build this bubble chart from D3. There's a lot of example code here, and we're going to get this plugged into React and our project. So over here, I'm just back in Visual Studio Code. I will fire up a new terminal. I've got a couple running. I'm just going to trash can a couple of those. And this is npm start is what led to this. So I'm just going to clear all this out. And the first thing you're going to do, you're going to npm install D3. And I got that information from the D3 documentation. Actually, I'm going to leave this bubble chart stuff up. Is d3js.org. We go under documentation, scroll down, getting started, installing, and then it says here for npm install D3. So we ran that. We have D3 installed. We can confirm that by looking inside package.json. We can see D3 is in fact listed here. And at that point, I'm just going to fire off npm start again. So remember, that's inside the hospital data directory. Both of those commands took place next to the package.json file that we're using in our hospital.data project. So let this run. I'm going to pull this tab out and make it full screen. And I don't want to put the bubble chart on the home page yet. We may eventually do that, but let's just add a link up here and a different route. So we just jump into app.js, scroll down. We're going to specify a new route right here. We'll put it, let's have it live at chart. So we're going to make a bubble chart. So we'll just call that, that's what our component will be called, bubble chart. Up here, it doesn't exist yet. I haven't hit save yet. We're just going to import bubble chart. Oops. From /components/ bubble chart. And then we have to put a link in here. So we'll just put this link. I'm just going to copy one of the existing ones, paste it in. That path again was just chart. And we'll just call the link name bubble chart. And so that's fine. We'll hit save. It's not going to compile. Things are missing. That's fine. So we'll open up components here. So if this was all closed up, we're inside hospital data, source, components. I'm going to minimize these. I'm going to get this table component right here. I'm just going to right click on that table component, copy that. I'm going to right click on components, and I'm going to hit paste. So we're just pasting it back inside this components directory. I'm going to right click on that again, rename. And so we're going to make this bubble chart. So we're working off that table component we'd built previously. So we're open index.js inside bubble chart. Take a look at this code. Notice this quit complaining. So I don't know that this, if we click on bubble chart, yeah, it just puts in that blank spot. So let's look at what we got. We're importing React, we're importing tabulator, and we're importing some tabulator styles. So we don't need either of these. We need D3. And so we will import star as D3, as we're just namespacing the entire library as the variable D3 from D3. So that's import everything, alias it under this variable from the library D3. And again, we can just say D3 because that's installed into our node modules. We installed that with npm and it gets installed into node modules. So now we're not going to have a class table. We're going to have a class bubble chart, but the behavior is going to be similar to what we have to do here. we're going to keep this reference. We're going to hang on to that React element reference. Tabulator table data columns. We'll just get rid of that. We may end up having to put it back, but we'll get rid of that for now. And I like this lifecycle hook here, component did mount. So we're going to do something when React is determined. React is looking at the state of everything. It's like, hey, it turns out that I do need to render the bubble chart for whatever reason. And it places the bubble chart on the page. And that's when we get into this hook, component did mount. And then once it's mounted, it'll call render. So some of the work we want to do inside render, some of the work we want to make sure we do inside component did mount, which will take place before render is called. Real quick, you see we've got a little typo here because we changed the name from table to bubble chart. So we just stub this in, and we're rendering out a div with a reference EL, right? So we're passing in this reference element that we've already created, and we have access to that element over here, and that's important. So this is probably a good spot. Let's we're not going to use tabulator. I don't think we need this. So I'm just going to cut that reference out of there. Hang on to that, and we're going to clear out component did mount. And so component did mount. What we're going to do here, we're going to plug in our D3 code. Real quick, I'm going to just put bubble chart down here in this H2. So this component, when it gets on the page and it renders, it's going to render a div, and it's going to have an H2 and another div inside of it. And so we can put some things on this div. We can put some properties on here and say ID equals bubble chart. So we have this bubble chart div. So I'm just going to hit save on that. I'm going to come over here to our React app, just refresh, bubble chart, home. I'm kind of surprised that didn't clean up. This is where we find out Lee may have done something wrong. We're going to keep trucking. Let's see if we should have an H2 bubble chart. Let's see, rent index, bubble chart components. Did I misspell anything? Bubble chart, bubble chart. Let's go back to app.js. Chart renders to bubble chart. Link to chart, bubble chart. That all looks good. I'm just hold down shift and hit refresh. Duke, wake med. Bubble chart shouldn't be pulling back the table. Maybe I rushed and we missed something. Components, bubble chart, that all looks right. Components, bubble chart. Index.js. Bubble chart extends component did mount. And we render this element. So let's just go ahead and let's make an SVG. So we're going to use D3. We have access to D3 here. So we're going to do D3 dot select, and we're going to select by that reference this dot el, and then we're going to append an SVG. And this SVG, let's just drop down a line. This SVG, we're going to set a couple attributes on it. So let's set the width, put that in quotes and spell it right. We'll set the width to 400. Let's set an adder height 400. And let's set an adder. There's a couple ways to do these. Let's just set the style attribute, and let's do a border thin red solid like we do in class. Save that. So we are selecting this.el, this reference that we have, and then we are appending an SVG inside of that, and we're setting the attributes on that. And we should see thin red border. I'm gonna kill this. So I just hit Control C down here. That's the only one I have running. Let's do npm start again. Just close that other tab. So we go to home, we go to bubble chart. That's much better. That's what we should have been seeing. So I think there was just some state hanging around. So just a hard restart on our dev server there. So we have our 3 different tables. Notice there's nothing else on the page. If we go to bubble chart, then we get this nice SVG rendered in, and we get our H2 here that says bubble chart. That's what we were expecting to see. That looks good. So inside component did mount, we are creating this SVG element. So I'm going to split this up, make this code a little more manageable. So I'm going to make a function here. So we'll just have a create SVG. Oops. So we'll create SVG method. I am just going to take this and plug it in here. And we're just going to return the reference back from this. So this function will just return that. And so when the component did mount, we will let SVG equal this dot create SVG. Once we've created our SVG, I'm going to stub in a new function. I want to be able to say draw chart, and I want to draw chart inside that SVG. So again, we're just stubbing this in. So let's make this draw chart, and it takes a reference to the SVG. So we'll just keep that variable the same name. Oh, also that's this dot draw chart. And so we have this dot create SVG, and then with that SVG, we just pass it into draw chart. And for draw chart, let's just do something really simple. Let's do an SVG dot append a circle with an attribute. Let's set that radius. Let's set it something big. Let's set it to 100. And so if we read our code, when the component mounts, we create an SVG. We draw a chart inside that SVG, and that chart consists of a circle with a radius of 100. The actual component itself renders a div. That div contains two elements, an h2 and another div, and then that SVG should then be inside of that div. So we'll go over here and look, and sure enough, there's our circle. We still have this red border. So this looks great. This is a great foundation to start building from, and we're just going to jump right over to that demo code or sample code. If I can get back to that tab. Back to this bubble chart sample code. And so he creates this object, few bits of code going on there. He's got a function here, pack, and this is running on the website. This observable HQ, you can actually click in these and edit these things and change things on the run or on the fly. So I'm looking, he's got a width and a height. Those are hard coded. He's got a formatter. He's just formatting some numbers. Our colors are going to be hard coded. When I look through here, I think the only thing I'm seeing that I need, we're going to need some sort of data, and we are going to need this pack function. This code, the way it's written, it's very clever. It's very sleek code. It's a little hard to understand, so I'm going to just grab this code, and let's rewrite that to start with. So I'm just going to paste this code in, and it only underlines, width and height. Those don't exist. We know what they are. It's currently hard-coded to 400. So let's make pack a function defined the same way. We're going to write this out the same way we did up here. So we would say, let's make this pack2, because that is, as it's written, that's still a valid function. So we're going to create a method called pack. Now, what you're looking at here, this may make it a little easier. If we just put parentheses here, and then we look at this line, that'll look like what we've talked about in class a lot. So there's an arrow function. And so we're saying pack. Pack is a function. That's what this is. So pack2 defines a function that takes data, right? And now we're working on the contents of this function, the function body. And so it calls d3.pack dot size. And then there's a width and a height, and they subtract 2. I assume that's a little bit of padding in there. So let's just pass size in. So that'll just be another argument that we take. So it'll be dot size. And then, or maybe here's another padding. Either way, we'll handle with that. We'll handle that outside of that. So we'll just keep the code the same there, padding 3. Now this is where things get kind of weird. Now notice there is no semicolon here. That's an arrow function with no curly braces, so there is no return statement. But notice we have another set of parentheses here and another set of data inside of that. So this function is being defined, and then it's immediately being called. And so I don't think that that's very clear. And it's certainly not what I want to see us writing in class right now. I mean, the code is fine. It's just a little too sleek. So we have this pack function that runs d3.pack. And so we want to return that element. And oops, you know what? Let me show you what this is doing. Let me back up because I'm going to get ahead of myself. Notice pack 2, right? This was what we just copy pasted in. And it takes this argument data, but that's getting passed over into this closure. So it's actually creating a hierarchy of data, and then that's what's getting passed to the d3.pack once it's configured. So calling pack, at this point, we don't actually need to pass in data. We could create this hierarchy elsewhere and then pass that in. So I'm just going to copy this like we were doing. I'm going to leave that sample code there. And so let's just make a, let's make another method. And let's just call it make hierarchy. That's a capital H. Did I spell this? I always spell it wrong. Make hierarchy. So we'll paste that in. So d3.hierarchy, and here's where data goes, right? So we need some data in here to specify that the children of this hierarchy is data. And then we just do a sum on this. And so we would have to know what data is passed in, but it's summing up by the value. And the way d3.hierarchy works, we'll go back and review the docs on this. It is trying to create a tree, but we don't have a tree. We just have a flat set of data, and that's the same thing this example is doing. So D3 hierarchy, we can go in here and look at this hierarchy code. And so we can look at sum, evaluates the specified value function for this node and each descendant in post-order traversal, returns this node, da-da-da-da-da. And so you must call, this is an important part right here, you must call node.sum or node.count before invoking a hierarchical layout that requires node.value. So we have to have some value has to be computed across all of these objects. So for us, we're going to have pricing information in here. And so we will either return pricing or we would just return the actual DRG code itself. And so I would imagine we'll use pricing. And so let's just go ahead and stub in. We know that's called average price for our data. So we get this hierarchy, and then we pass that into pack, the result of that. And if we stick a return on this, return here, d3.pack size padding is going to return a function. It returns a pack layout function, and that's clear. You can see the documentation there when we hover over it. Up here is the return value. So we're going to leave this as is. I'm going to take data out of this, so you're just going to pass in a size. So that's the bounding box that you want to pack things into. And then we have this make hierarchy function here. I'm going to hit save and format that. So this make hierarchy, let's get rid of this. We don't need this now. So this is going to turn our data into a D3 hierarchy. We return it there. So I'm going to keep this organized. So I'm just moving this component did mount right above render. And so we get the SVG, we call draw chart. Draw charts doing an svg.append circle adder da-da-da-da-da. So instead of appending this circle adder, we want to put some data inside a bounding box and do that circle packing layout. So really simple to get started here. Let's see, we have to make hierarchy. Let's do that first. So we'll say let hierarchical data equal make hierarchy, and that's a this dot make hierarchy. Now we'll have to pass some data into that. We haven't said what that data is yet. Then we will let our pack layout equal this dot pack, and we know that our thing's hard-coded 400, 400. And then he had put some padding in there, so we can do 400 minus 5, 400 minus 5, or margin, should say padding, some margins. And so then when we want to render this, we want to use this pack layout to draw things we will call pack layout as a function, and we will pass hierarchical data into that. So this is all stubbed out. It's not going to do anything. It's probably broken. It may complain. It's certainly not going to render anything other than this because we've just done this SVG append. But if you'll remember what we talked about class, we need to do this data join. So make hierarchy needs some data passed into it. We need to do a data join with that data. So we're just keep working off the sample code before we jump over to our data. So I may have to go back and switch that from average price to value. So this data gets evaluated. They have a list of values there. Yeah, so just a list of objects. I think we can just go ahead and grab our data. So let's just grab the Duke data. So we will import Duke DRG from ... // we go up 2 levels, data / Duke, and now that lets us import that Duke DRG. If you want to know that variable name again, you can just look inside of here. I probably messed it up. I called it the wrong variable. I did. I called it Duke _ DRG. Import Duke _ DRG. That's something else we have to fix. The linter's probably not going to be happy about that. So we have some data in here. So now when we go inside, draw chart. Let's see. Right here, when we make hierarchy, we'll just pass in Duke DRG. And ... / data. Oh, it's still mad about that. Oh yeah, there we go. DRG. Sorry. Have to specify the file name there. So we've got some data. Let's reference their sample one more time. So we look at the bubble chart sample code. I'm just going to grab all of this code. And let's jump back into here. And so draw chart. We've done some work. We put some of our code up here. I'm just going to paste in their code. I'm going to hit save. We'll go through and replace some of the errors. So we already have this SVG element set up. That got passed in. So we can get rid of that. Notice they calls this const root equals pack data. So that's that hierarchical data is where this gets passed in. So root for us is going to be pack layout. So we can just say const root equals pack layout. So now we can erase that. And the rest of that looks right. There's some stuff in here. We can talk about this. We don't have the DOM bits imported and available. So I'm just going to delete both of those lines. Here, it's setting the fill color. We can just set this. Actually, let's just hard code this. So we're messing with the Duke data, so we'll just fill this as navy. And it puts some text in here. We're not going to append any text. We'll get rid of that. We are not going to use the clipping paths. We may have to come back and add that. Once again, not using any text. We just want to draw some circles. So we have our root is from our pack layout where we passed in the hierarchical data. We have an SVG element that is there. We select all groups, all the G elements. We create this data join, root.leaves. And so you would have to go look at the leaves method, which we can hover over and see, returns the array of leaf nodes. We've not used this syntax, but this dot join is just explicitly and shorthandedly saying, hey, every time we enter on this data, create a group. And then we transform this group, and this is going to be set by this pack layout. So notice we are looping over. We're doing this data join on this pack layout. So this pack layout is going to alter our data items and give us this d.x, d.y, this x and y set on the data. So we can do a console.log, and we look at what these different values are. And so we create this leaf. It's one of these groups. And then inside that group, we append a circle. And then because this pack layout is working for circle packing, it also gives us a radius, an R attribute in there. So we're using that. So we position the group, and then we size the circle based off that. So we have created a group for each leaf, and then we have appended a circle inside of that. And then this returns svg.node. We don't actually need that. We're not going to return anything. So hit save. It compiles. And then we'll go over and take a look inside our app. Notice we still have this other circle hanging out in here. So let's just get rid of that SVG append circle and hit save. And so here's all the Duke data automatically packed in for us. And so it just put it in a circle, and it did bounds by 400 by 400 minus 5 or 10 or whatever we had plugged in for the margins. And so we're headed down the right path. Now we need to get the next set of data. We need to get the UNC data in here. I want to draw a bigger chart. And so let's make some things variable here. Something a little easier to plug in, something that we can manipulate. So let's just set a width equal to, let's not do 400. Let's double that at least. So let's do 800. Let's do a height equal to 600. Now, anywhere we're using width and height, let's go plug in this dot width, this dot height. And so we were using that for the packing area here. So this dot width, oops. I believe it's width and height. What's it say? Oh yeah, that was ours. So I believe it's width and height. If not, we can just flip-flop those. So width and height, we'll hit save. We'll go back over and look. So it got a little bigger here. It looks pretty good with a little more room. So, and I guess it really needs to be square since it's circle packing, not ellipse packing. So maybe we just need this dot width twice. So we're drawing the chart, and the data that we're passing in is the data we've imported. So let's import all three data sets. So we're going to get Duke, DRG, UNC, DRG, and WakeMed, DRG. So that'll come from UNC, and that'll come from WakeMed. So with these data sets brought in, we need to change a couple things. First, we need to merge all three of these data sets together. But we also, and when I say merge them together, just put them all in one big array. We also want to keep track of the school for each one. So once again, a little more data prepping here. Component did mount. Before we draw a chart, let's just prep some data. And we can also do this in the constructor. I don't know which way. Let's do it in the constructor, actually. Probably be a better way to do it. So just back up here at the top, we will toss in a constructor function. And the constructor gets passed props. So we call super. So we are, oops, sorry about that. So we are working on the bubble chart component. Super just calls that component right here, what we're extending. And so we just pass those props over. And why did it turn green? Useless constructor. Yeah, of course it's useless. We haven't added anything yet. And so now we want to prep our data. So we can first go over all of the data from Duke DRG. And we can add, let's do this. So Duke DRG, keep in mind, is going to be an array. There are objects in that array. We want to do something to each object and return a new array of those mutated objects. So that's a good use for map. And so map is going to get an R. It's going to get a record. And all we're going to do on each record, we're just going to say r.name equals Duke. So we're just going to hard code that. And we're going to say this dot Duke data equals that map. And so now I'm going to copy, paste this in a couple times. So we're going to do Duke, UNC, and WakeMed. And this becomes UNC, drg.map. And this one becomes WakeMed, drg.map. And this becomes this dot UNC data and this dot WakeMed data. So now I'm just going to put all three of these together. So we'll just say this dot data equals Duke data dot concat. And so concat just puts multiple arrays together. So, oh, and that needs this reference. So we have this dot Duke data dot concat this dot UNC data, as well as this dot WakeMed data. So we look back through this. Once we instantiate this, we loop over all the Duke data and add Duke in as the name property. We rinse and repeat for UNC and WakeMed. And then finally, we create just this data property. So now, when we draw our chart, this pack layout and our pack layout for hierarchical data, we're not just making our hierarchy on Duke DRG, we're going to make our hierarchy on this dot data, which we set here in the constructor. So we're going to create a hierarchy of all of the data. When we create these leaf nodes, we're going to have to change this a little bit. So we create this leaf node as just a group. So I'm just going to hit enter, drop down a little bit. Instead of saying dot join G, let's just be explicit. And let's do a dot enter. And on enter, we want to append G. So we make that a little more explicit. We're setting the attribute on here. And then we're going to figure out how this group should be classed. And so this can be classed, 3 options. This could be classed UNC. This could be classed Duke. Or this could be classed WakeMed. And if we want to know how it should be classed, then we write this function over here. We look at the datum that we have access to, and we say d.data, because remember, we're data joining on these root leaves. And so if you go in here and look at what it's returning, it returns a hierarchy circular node. And so there's an extra data property. Our data has been wrapped up. So we're under data. And so we are going to be d.data.name. So just copy that. Just going to stub this in on each line. Let's paste that in there. So all 3 of these lines look the same. I'm just going to hold Control on Mac, I think it is. On Windows, it's Alt. So I get a cursor on each line here. And so we just want to say if the name is equal to, and then back up to the first line here. There's probably no need to do all 3 lines at the same time. So name triple equals UNC. So we want to class this as UNC if the name is triple equals to UNC. And then we'll do triple equals Duke. And finally, triple equals WakeMed. So we'll save on that. And so then that'll class those circles. Let's take a look, see if this is drawn, broken. Doesn't look like it's working. Let's inspect this and see if we can find a console error. Expected length, and it got not a number. So leaf equals SVG. We append a G. We set an attribute, transform D. Then here, leaf.append circle. So let's just come right here and let's put in curly braces. And let's do a console.log. And we want to log out what D is. So we can inspect that. And then let's just hard code this. So we'll just set these, we'll set all of these to 20. So, oops, that should be a semicolon. And a return. So this is not going to work. This will be broken. Just want to get something going on the page, something we can look at. So there's a bunch of circles all just stacked up there. So here, node data, WakeMed. Yep, so we messed something up. I probably messed it up here. Let's reread what we did. Duke DRG map rr.name. That'd be the problem right there. So we're just returning this string. That's my fault. So we want to map over these. Let's throw curly braces in here. And after we set the name, we want to return that record. So I apologize, that's my fault. Come back over here, curly brace, return the record. And one more time, set those to curly braces, semicolon, return the record. So let's put our curly braces in here. That should be a semicolon, so we'll hit save. Formats that down. There we go. And boyo, that's a lot of data in there. So let's go down here where we were hard-coded. I went too far. We were returning 20s. We don't need to log these out anymore. We saw the error that I'd made and fixed it. So here we can just return. We don't even need to do a return. We get rid of these curly braces. And this just becomes d.r again. So we'll save that, come back over, and now here's our entire data set inside of here. Now we've set the fill color to these. They're all set to navy. But let's take a look at this transform, each group. Let's see if we see a difference. So these all say Duke. Let's see, do we have any that say UNC or Wake Med? Confirm that our code is working. I'm not seeing any. Let's go take a look again at what we're doing. We create a group, we transform that group. It is classed UNC if d.data.name is triple equal to UNC. It's classed Duke if d.data.name is triple equals to Duke. And Wake Med, d.data.name is triple equals to Wake Med. That doesn't look wrong. We can throw a console.log in here, or we could inspect this on the client side. But let's go up. Potentially, we just did something wrong here. Duke DRG map, this.Duke data, this.UNC data. This.data is the Duke data concatenated, UNC data, and Wake Med data. That actually all looks correct. And I don't see a reason this would default to being classed Duke. Oh, there's a show all nodes. Look, as soon as I click back over. Well, that would be a little more helpful. Yeah, so our classes are all right. So this adder fill navy, we can leave it set to navy, but we don't need to do anything for that fill. So we can just take this out, hit save, and then we're in our bubble chart here. So we're just going to do a new file in this bubble chart directory. So source components bubble chart, new file in there. And so that'll just be styles.css. And so in here, we can say that a .unc circle, so that's a group class UNC circle, will get a fill of corn, flour, blue. Oops. And then we will repeat that a .duke circle gets a fill of navy. And a .wake med circle gets a fill, and we'll just do red. Or is there a crimson? Yeah, we do crimson. So cornflower, blue, navy, and crimson. And then just back here in our component, so we're back in bubble chart index.js. We're just going to import /styles.css. And so now when this renders, we can see all of our data in here in the same order that it was in. We haven't called sort yet. And we get all the different classes. And so just by looking at this, we can see obviously which one's Wake Med data, and we can get rid of this. Close that. Which one's Wake Med data, which one's Duke data, and which one's UNC data. So if we wanted to change the way this is laid out, we can do something with the data. We can sort the data a certain way. So right now the data is unsorted, and so it's built itself from the inside out. While we're in here cleaning all of this data, we can just do a sort. We can also do the sort down here. Let's just do the sort when we draw the chart. So I'm just going to call this data, and then we will let data equal this.data. So I went back, I fixed the sorting, so I'm recording this part separately. So this is what your visualization looks like. The circle packing algorithm loops over that data. from the top of the array, the very first item in that array, to the very last item in the array. And so what you see, this bullseye effect, is that it's all the Duke data, all the UNC data, and then finally all of the Wake Med data. If we pop back into Visual Studio Code, of course, to understand why the data is in that format, that's right here. This .data equals the concatenation of Duke, UNC, and Wake Med. So if we were to just alter, I'll just cut that out. So all I'm going to do is flip-flop these. And so that UNC is last, you should notice that our color rings flip-flop. So now it goes Duke, Wake Med, and UNC. To make this a little more visually interesting, couple options right here. We're keeping the part where we move the data over. We can just toss in a D3.shuffle and shuffle that data before we create our hierarchy from it. And now we have this randomized pattern. So we'll refresh the page. And every time we refresh, that pattern's going to be a little different. The other option we could do, we could sort this data right here. And so we can say data.sort, and then we pass in a function. We're going to use an arrow function for this. Sort's going to receive A and B. So it's looping over each record, each row, that hospital data. And so we need to tell the sort function, hey, if I'm comparing these two records, then to tell you whether or not to sort this as a greater than or less than the one you're comparing it to, this function needs to return a value less than 0 or more than 0. So if it's more than 0, it means, hey, sort this to the higher side. If it's less than 0, sort this to the lower side. So we can simply return parseInt. So we just make sure that we have integers. A parseInt minus a parseInt. So we're going to subtract an integer from another integer. And so we're just going to parse A.averagePrice as an integer. And we're going to parse B.averagePrice as an integer. And by doing a subtraction between the two, this will either be a value less than 0 or a value more than 0. And so we can save this and look at our visualization. And you can see we get this nice kind of spirally effect. And all of our larger values fall to the outside, kind of get this tunnel look to it. If we switch this, B.averagePrice minus A.averagePrice, so which one we're subtracting from, it inverts that. And so we have the largest values are in the center, and the smallest values are to the outside. And so as we refresh this, this doesn't change. The data's sorted. That sort is permanent. So I'll leave that up to you. You can put whatever you like the best in there. So this could be a sort. So data.sort AB. You can parse int. You can subtract A from B or subtract B from A. And then you can also just do a shuffle. So choice is yours on how you would want to do that. And then that puts it back to the bullseyes.